Did that sound as satisfying to you as it did to me? Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Heather and as always I'm reading with a vengeance, and as always I hope you are as well. How is everybody's summer going? Because it is still summer. Yes, I mean, I know September 1st hits and everybody's like, fall, scarves, boots, jeans, long sleeves, flannels, pumpkin spice, apple cider. But really, it's still summer. Is anybody sorry to see summer go? Or are we just ready for some cooler weather? How's our reading doing? Did anybody else have kind of a distracted August? I got a lot of reading done, but it felt like it kind of stuttered at the beginning. I'm not sure what that was. I know we've been really busy and I know I've talked about it before, but fortunately I still have a pretty decent amount of books to talk to you about today. This week was a really fun week. This week was a week of celebrities for me. Earlier in the week, I went up to Boston with some girlfriends of mine and we saw Celeste Barber do her stand-up show. If you don't know who she is an Australian comedian, but she has become internationally known for her Instagram account because she does, what do you call it? She takes like model pictures and she mocks them. She duplicates them in her own way, and it's kind of a friendly mockery, you know, because a lot of times like fashion magazines, the photographs, I mean, they're beautiful, clever, unique photographs, but usually they're in ridiculous positions or wearing ridiculous clothes or just doing ridiculous things. And Celeste Barber kind of pokes fun at it, and hilarious. If you get a chance, look her Instagram account up. It's pretty funny. And then last night, you guys will be more interested in this. Last night, I went to a talk and got to listen to, in person, Taylor Jenkins Reid. She's on a tour right now, so I'm not sure of her schedule, but you can look her up and see where she's heading or heading next. And she was in Clinton, Connecticut. RJ Julia is a bookstore chain. They hosted her. Your ticket included, of course, admission to listen to her talk. And she talked for a good long hour, I would say. And she answered questions by the host, who is an employee of the bookstore. She hosted it and asked questions. And then she also allowed audience members to ask questions, which I thought was really great. I didn't ask a question. I couldn't think of a clever question to ask, like, who's your favorite author? You know, I didn't do that. But it was really great. She's super, what I was saying before. The ticket included admission, but it also included a signed copy of Carrie Soto is Back. What a beautiful cover. And it's got a beautiful spine as well. And even the naked cover, I mean, it's plain, but you usually don't see the purple and yellow. Ooh, I don't think my camera's capturing it. This is purple. I decided to share it with you today because I'm not doing hauls right now. I'm trying to read through my current library because we are downsizing. But anyways, I got a copy of this. I've read Evelyn Hugo and I've read Daisy Jones. I haven't read Malibu Rising yet. And not that you have to, but I want to read Malibu Rising because Carrie Soto is introduced in Malibu Rising. So I kind of want to meet her there first. So I won't be reading this right away, but it's a beautiful cover, and yeah, and she signed it right there. I thought they were all going to be pre-signed, but she went to town and signed it. So that was kind of exciting. I got to listen to her, Taylor Jenkins Reid talk. She's got a great personality. She's super witty. She's super smart. She's super self-deprecating and just funny, and she's all about women power, which, you know, it's just so great. Someone who is on the platform that she's on, and just the stuff she's shouting out is just really great. So that was last night, super fun. So as per the thumbnail, I am doing my August wrap up, part 2. So these are all the books that I read in the second half of the month. And I did pretty good as far as reading the books that I set out for myself in my TBR. I've decided to kind of look back to see how I'm doing, comparing my wrap-ups to that month's TBR, because it hadn't felt like I've been reading all of the books on my TBR. And I didn't this time. I read 8 out of the 10 that I set for myself, which isn't bad. And I wanted to ask you guys, do you guys even care? I mean, when I post a video of, oh, here's my August TBR and here are the books, and then I post my wrap up and they don't match, does that bother you? Is it like, do you guys expect every single book on the TBR to match the wrap up? I don't know. I don't think that you would expect that, but hopefully you're not too disappointed if they don't match up. I promise I intend to read the books that I set in my TBR, but I'm a mood reader, so I will pick them out and have full intentions to read them. And then when it comes time to pick up my next book, just sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Also, when I'm listening to my book, I listen to books based on what's available. So I only take things off my Goodreads TBR, but then, it really depends on what's available on my Libby app. So those will be kind of random. Just wanted to put it out there and ask you guys if it bothers you. Like, oh, she plans on reading this book. I can't wait for her wrap up. And then I don't read that book. So let's get started with the books. Oh, let's start with the stats. Do you guys like the stats? I don't do that every month, but I've been trying to, and if you guys really like the stats, I want to know. And I'll probably continue to do the stats, and then if you don't like the stats, you can do the whole fast forward. So I read a total of 13 books in the month of August. I had no DNFs, yay. I read 10 women authors, yay me, but only one person of color author. That's a fail. Read 8 physical books, 0 digital books, 5 audiobooks. The genres, I've got 1 sci-fi, 5 mystery thrillers, 2 graphic novels, 1 romance, 1 literary fiction, 2 contemporary fiction, and 1 nonfiction. And then my star ratings, I read 1 5-star book, which I'll be talking about to you on this video that I'm super excited about. I had 4 4-star books, 3 3.5-star books, 4 3-star books, and only 1 2-star book. So pretty good reading month, if I do say so myself. And yeah, I read 8 out of the 10 books for my August TBR. Pretty good. I will link down below my mid-month wrap-up, my August mid-month wrap-up. But just a reminder, I read Artificial Condition by Martha Wells, which is the Murderbot Diary series. I read The Last House on Needless Street by Katrina Ward. I read The One by John Mars. Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaughey. I read Volume 1 of the Heartstopper series by Alice Oseman. And I read It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. So let's get on with the books that I read in the second half of August. First up is Jar of Hearts by Jennifer Hillier. I have been wanting to read this book for months. I've seen many booktubers talk about it and rave about it. I haven't heard anybody say a bad thing about this book, and it did not disappoint. It was pretty good. So this follows Geo. It goes back and forth in timeline. It's got dual timeline. In the one timeline, Geo is in high school and she's got 2 best friends, and it's Angela Wong, who is like a super popular, beautiful girl. She's also got a best friend, Kaiser Brody, who is a shy guy, but still, the 3 of them are thick as thieves. While they're in high school, Geo meets Calvin and they become a thing. Calvin is older. He's, I want to say, about 5 years older. He's like 21 and Geo is 16. And they get into a relationship, and there is some tension because if all the attention isn't on Angela, Angela gets pissed off. When Calvin, takes a shine to Geo instead of Angela, there's some tension there and stuff happens. And then also the relationship between Calvin and Geo is a volatile one. Calvin can be physically abusive, and he also is manipulative. You find out early on in the book, I think the very first chapter you read is in the present day, and you find out that Calvin has murdered some women and he's serving time in prison. Angela goes missing while they're in high school. And then fast forward 14 years later, you find out that Calvin, who not only has been in prison for killing other women, we find out because Angela's remains are found that Calvin also killed Angela. This is not a spoiler, you find this out early on. But then you also find out because Calvin and Gio, Angela's best friend, were in a relationship, Gio knew what happened to Angela and she never said a word and Angela was missing for 14 years. Her folks didn't know what happened to her. Nobody knew. So the authorities find out that Gio knew, and so she served some time in prison. I want to say 5 years, 5 or 7 years. As the reader, you are spending time in prison with Gio. Not as much time as I think a lot of people said, but there's a good portion of the book where you are in prison with Gio and finding out what happens to her, how she changes, and then she's also kind of thinking back to high school about how things were between her and Calvin, how things were between her and Angela. Kaiser, her other best friend in high school, he grows up to be a police detective, and he is actually the one that arrests Gio, interestingly enough. So then Gio gets out of prison and she goes back home to stay with her dad in the town that Angela is missing. Everybody hates her. Nobody wants her there. And then women start turning up murdered again. But Calvin's still in prison. So your story goes from there. I wouldn't say this is a slow burn, but it is a simmering burn because you know something awful has happened. You know that Gio knew what happened and she didn't say anything, and you want to know why, and you're constantly asking that question. It's not a thriller as far as a page turner thriller, but it is, you know, something terrible has happened. There's also a pretty decent twist in this book. I did not see it coming, so that was pretty impressive. I do want to mention, I read this book directly after It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. If you read that book, or maybe even if you haven't read it, you know that It Ends With Us deals with domestic violence. And this one had, of course, some domestic violence as well. And I made a note for myself, page 138. What did I mark on page 138? It doesn't spend as much time on the psychology of domestic abuse as Colleen Hoover did in her book. But there's a page here, I want to read a little bit of a passage that I thought was interesting. The way it was handled here was different also because we're dealing with a 16-year-old girl who's in an abusive relationship. And that's just a whole nother can of worms, right? I thought this was really interesting. You know, being in an abusive relationship was nothing like Gio expected. She knew hitting was wrong, of course. She wasn't stupid. They had discussed the issue of domestic violence back in 6th grade. It was part of the social studies curriculum, on and on and on. It says everybody knew that violence in a relationship was wrong, just like smoking, drugs, alcohol, unprotected sex, sex without consent, and so on. Nobody was clueless about this stuff. There was no lack of education. Ignorance was not the problem. The problem was that none of those public service announcements addressed any of the real issues behind abusive relationships. A relationship isn't supposed to make you feel out of control. It's not supposed to consume you. It's not supposed to change you into someone you don't want to be. But how do you teach that? How do you explain to someone who's never been in a romantic relationship what a healthy relationship feels like? How do you explain to a 16-year-old girl who's never been in love what love is supposed to feel like? And another thing these lessons didn't address, just how quickly the abuse would start to feel normal. I thought that was genius writing. I thought that really encapsulated domestic violence in a concise, direct way. And as long as we're on the subject of trigger warnings, and I have to say, because I am not sensitive at all to really anything, but there was a scene in here, there's a rape scene in here that is quite disturbing. But I will say it wasn't gratuitous. It needed to be in here. You needed to feel what Gio was feeling at the time. There's also a rather violent scene that's part of a murder in here that's also quite disturbing. One thing I will say, I don't know who's in charge of this stuff. I don't know anything about the publishing world, really. I don't know if it's the editor or if there is an actual or proofreader or who's in charge at Minotaur Books Publishing. I don't know what happened, but there are a buttload of typos in here. I mean, multiple per page, many pages. Not every page, but to the point I was annoyed. Through the whole book, I was annoyed by the amount of typos in here. And like, not just misspelled words, although that's in here too, but like words out of order. Big typos. It was bad. But that notwithstanding, this was quite a ride. The last 50 pages, oh my God. Then it became a page turner. It was crazy. So yeah, I gave this one 4 stars. I would recommend it if you like horror. Because like I said, it's not really a thriller. Because I think of thriller, I think of page turner. Like, oh my God, what's gonna happen next? That doesn't really happen until like the last 50 pages. But it is a simmering, delicious, disturbing read. The next book I read was November Road by Berney. And this is a book of the month club. And I didn't pick this one though. This, a friend of mine gets book of the month as well. And she sent it to me. She really liked it. And oh my God, it took me by surprise. So this one follows, there's 3 different perspectives that alternates per chapter. One perspective is Frank, and he is kind of a lieutenant of a major crime boss, like a mob boss in New Orleans. Oh, by the way, it's called November Road. It takes place pretty much the week of John F. Kennedy's assassination, so 1963. Anyways, Frank used to be a man about town, used to, because he was so highly connected to the mob, he got whatever he wanted when he wanted. He lived high on the hog, all of that good stuff. But then JFK is assassinated and Frank knows too much about it because his boss has a hand in it. So because Frank knows too much about it, he's on the run because his boss now wants to get rid of everybody who either knows about who was responsible or had a hand in it or whatever. So Frank is on the run because he knows that his boss wants him dead now. Another perspective is Charlotte, and Charlotte is in a very dead-end town, dead-end life, in a dead-end marriage, married to an alcoholic who doesn't appreciate her at all. He's not abusive per se, but he doesn't really hold Charlotte in high regard. Charlotte has 2 young daughters. I believe they're like 8 and 10 or 6 and 8. Sweet little girls. Anyways, one night Charlotte's had enough and she wants to start her life over. So she takes her daughters and her dog and she hits the road. So those 2 perspectives kind of go back and forth. They're both kind of heading in the same direction and then their lives merge and they meet, Frank and Charlotte, and they decide to, for reasons, hit the road together. And then enter a 3rd perspective, and that is an assassin hired by Frank's boss to find Frank and deal with him. What else can I say about this book? It's so good. Frank's character, he's one of those morally gray, of course. He used to work for the mob. He's got a conscience. He's got charm. He's good looking. He's a likable character. Charlotte, of course, you can't help but root for Charlotte. She's a good woman and she deserves to have a life that brings her joy and have a life that she feels good about bringing her daughters up in. One thing I did want to mention for this book, and it's not really a spoiler, but I've mentioned a couple of times in previous videos that I'm not a huge romance fan. I don't read a lot of specifically romance genre books. They're okay. I've read a couple that are cute, but I don't mind a romance that happens in another book. If it's a mystery thriller or even contemporary fiction or literary fiction or even in horror, I don't mind a romance that happens. And in this one, a romance happens and it's sweet and lovely. There are really fun side characters. There's some side kind of events, plots that happen that aren't huge parts of the story, but add a lot of color to the story. So I would say this is a thriller because every page, I wanted to turn every page. I wanted to find out what happened next in each character's life. So it's thriller, it's love story, it's a game of survival. You are not sure until the absolute last page who makes it out of here alive. I gave this book 5 stars. Highly recommend. The next book I read was The Dutch House by Ann Patchett. I listened to this book, and let me tell you something. If you are interested in this book and you enjoy an audiobook, I highly recommend listening to the book. It is narrated by Tom Hanks, and I'm not necessarily a huge fan of Tom Hanks, but he did a phenomenal job. It absolutely added to the enjoyment of the story with his narration of it. His inflection, even when he just said like chapter 7, it was with charm and wit. I don't know how he does it, just by saying chapter 7 or chapter 8, part 3. It was enjoyable. Really, really great audiobook. So what is it about, Heather? Well, this gave me a lot of the Heart's Invisible Furies vibes. This is a family saga spanning several decades, all told in first person from Danny's point of view. And it's Danny and his brother Maeve, who grow up in the titular Dutch house. The Dutch house was bought by their father, Cyril, interestingly enough, who is the main character in Heart's Invisible Furies. But he's not really a big character in the book. But anyways, so Cyril is the father. He buys this house. Cyril's wife, Elna, Danny and Maeve's mother, hates the house for many reasons. She hates the house. She actually ends up leaving the family when Danny is 6 and Maeve is 10-ish. Cyril is left to take care of them-ish. Several years later, Cyril marries Andrea, and Andrea can't stand the children. In fact, all she really wanted was the house. So Andrea comes in, finagles her way into the family. She brings her 2 younger daughters into the house, and things start to go sideways. A couple of years later, Cyril dies, and Andrea effectively kicks Maeve and Danny out of the house. By this time, Maeve is already in college, I think, but Danny's in high school. But she has Maeve come and get Danny, and they're kicked out of the house. This story, like I said, is told from Danny's point of view. He's telling the story as an adult. He's super, super close with his sister, Maeve. It just kind of tells their story of the paths that each of their lives have taken and why. Every once in a while, they get together as adults and they drive and sit and park in front of the Dutch house and kind of either reminisce about their childhood memories and wonder what's going on in the house. It's not as creepy as it sounds, but also, like the Heart's Invisible Furies, there's lots of humor in the dialogue. Lots of humor. The dialogue was quite entertaining. I really, really enjoyed this book. It's very similar to Invisible Furies in that plot-wise, it's not really like a whole lot happens and there's like no twist in the story, or it's just a family saga. And it's just an entertaining story to follow. I really, really enjoy Ann Patchett's books. Yeah, this is the third Ann Patchett I've read. I read Bel Canto, which I loved. I read The Magician's Assistant, which I loved. And this one I gave 4 stars. I really, really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend it. And like I said, listen to it if you have an interest in this book. Next book I read was Oona Out of Order by Margarita Montimore. I listened to this one as well. This one, I enjoyed this one. This one was an interesting one, and I just read recently, I think they're going to do a movie on this book, which I think would be a really good movie. Anyways, the title says a lot about what it's about. This follows Oona. You first meet her at the beginning of the book on the eve of her 19th birthday. And her birthday is January 1st, so New Year's Eve is a big deal. It's the eve of her 19th birthday, and she's partying up. She's a musician in a band. She's madly in love with her boyfriend who's in the band. She's at a party. They're having a great time. She's on the cusp of making this big decision on if she's going to go to London to study or is she going to tour with the band. She has this decision to make, and then all of a sudden she wakes up on her birthday and she is 53 years old. The way it works is in her mind, she's still 19. Inside, she's the right age chronologically, but when she wakes up, it's years later and her body is 51 years old. That's the first leap she makes. I believe she makes 6 or 7 leaps in this book. And for some unknown reason, that's what happens. Each birthday, she wakes up and she lives her life out of order. The only two people that know are her mother and her assistant, who she meets that first leap that she makes when she's 51 years old. She wakes up in this big, beautiful house that is hers, that she finds out. She finds out she's ridiculously rich because of investments that she made, because she knows what happens. You know, when she leaps to 1 year, she knows that it's a really good idea to invest in Google and Apple and all that kind of stuff. So she doesn't have to worry about money. She doesn't have to worry about going to a regular job. Those little nuances as far as what would happen if you woke up 10 years in the future or however many years in the future. So that first leap, she meets her assistant. He knows all about it. And he pretty much kind of takes care of her. Also, on some years that she wakes up on her birthday, she has written herself a letter like the night before to say, basically warnings. Your instinct might tell you to do this, but please trust me, do this instead. But not every leap does she get these helpful little letters. So there are struggles. So she wakes up, she's a 19-year-old in a 51-year-old body, and she deals with it for a year. And then her next birthday, she wakes up and she's, I think, 30, the second time. So this is a book about, obviously, consequences of our actions, the decisions that she makes, and what happens to not only her life, but to the people in her life. This also deals, with what if we had the opportunity to go back and relive certain moments in our lives, with intentions of making better decisions for better outcomes. And, there's that ripple effect. Does it really make a better outcome? And even if it does, how does it affect other people that are touched by that outcome? And I thought that was an interesting approach, and I really enjoyed reading about that. Oona was kind of whiny at times, but then again, if you're living your life out of order, I guess I'll give her a pass. That could probably be very annoying. This also deals with mother-daughter relationships. She has a volatile one with her mom, which makes things sticky because her mom is one of the only two people that know about this thing that's happening to her. She's able to help her in the best way that she can, but at the same time, they're mother and daughter, and Oona gets annoyed with her mom for certain reasons that you read about. So there's that, and I really enjoy, I'm really close with my mom, and so I really enjoy reading the dynamics of a mother-daughter relationship, different ones. It was a really fun read. 1 year she wakes up and she's married to a guy, so she has to deal with that. And then, I don't want to spoil too much because, I just don't want to spoil too much. I would recommend this book. There's a solid twist that I did not see coming. Seems to be the theme of this video. So hats off to the author for that one. It really made the second half of this book, if not the last third of the book maybe, really, really engaging. So, because you want to know, well, what's going to happen now? How is this going to play out? So I would definitely recommend this book. I gave it 3.5 stars. The next book I read was The Switch by Beth O'Leary. You guys, I don't like romance, not really. Okay, so I picked this one up because I actually read The Flat Share by Beth O'Leary, and I really enjoyed The Flat Share. It is super cute. It's super heartwarming. The thing about The Flat Share is it a romance? Yes, but there's deeper issues there. It's not a fluffy book. I don't want to generalize that, romance books, they're all fluffy. I don't want to do that. I mean, It Ends With Us was considered a romance book, and there was nothing fluffy about that, believe me. That's the reason I picked up The Switch. This is Beth O'Leary's second novel. This follows Lena, who is the younger, and her grandmother, Eileen, and they decide, for reasons, to switch lives. Lena is living, in the fast lane in London, and Eileen has just divorced her husband, even though she's on the cusp of her 80th birthday. She lives out in the country, and she's super involved with, neighborhood watch and just the neighbors, and it's an elderly village that she lives in. Eileen moves into Lena's flat with her flatmates, Fitz, who is a young, seemingly irresponsible man who doesn't really have his life together, and Martha, who's about to have a baby with her wife, Yaz, who I think is always traveling. And they kind of help her, Eileen, kind of get in the dating scene, you know, the online dating thing. And then Lena moves into Eileen's house out in the country, and she befriends all these elderly folks because Eileen was very, very involved with all these projects and festivals that they have in this village. Lena decides that she's going to just step into Eileen's shoes and take care of all these projects, and she becomes involved in all of these elderly folks' lives. Now, of course, there's a romance involved for both of them. Honestly, most of this was quite boring for me. The idea is cute. There's some cute dialogue and just some of the things that happen, you know, that shouldn't happen to a 79-year-old woman, or some of the things that happen that shouldn't happen to, I don't even know how old Lena is. I want to say around 30. So cute and funny in a way, but as is, I think, with a lot of romances, the romances that are going to happen with each of these characters, you see from a mile away. So there's that. The side characters, I thought, were cute, but flat. Not a lot going on there, just thrown in, I think. I will say the one thing that I really, really appreciated, and perhaps I'm biased because I'm in my 50s, she handles the elderly very, very well. Elderly folks, they're just like the rest of us. They're just like young people. They've just been around longer. You know, they have interests and they have thoughts and ideas, and I don't know, it's just kind of a given that the younger generations, you know, treat elderly just kind of in a dismissive way. I found the elderly characters in this book so much more engaging and interesting and multi-dimensional than any of the younger characters in this book, and I think that was by design. So I really, really appreciated that. I really liked how Lena was written as far as how she engaged in these relationships with these elderly folks who started off as strangers, and she became friends with them, authentic, sincere friends. So I really appreciated that. Anyways, I gave this 3 stars. Next book I read was Volume 2 of Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. This follows, if you haven't already heard, I don't know how many books total are in this series. I want to say 4 or 5, I think. I talked about the volume 1 in the mid-month wrap-up, and yes, it was cute. You know, so many people are way over the moon about this series, and it is cute, and it's sweet, and it's well-written, and it deals with relevant themes, and yes, super cute. Dude, I absolutely fall madly in love with Heartstopper or Nick and Charlie. Not really, but I did enjoy it. It's super cute. I did give the first one 3 stars. This one I actually even liked better, or I liked more. Poor grammar. I enjoyed this one more because it dealt with deeper themes. In this one, they deal with the nuances of coming out and what that entails, especially for teenagers, and how hard it is. And she really gets into it in this one. And then she also gets into, you know, self-identification, you know, the labels that we put on ourselves and how important are they. And as a teenager, it's super hard. And she deals with them, I think, beautifully in this book. And so I really did like this one a lot more than, well, not a lot more, but I liked this one more than I liked the first one. And I'm hoping that steady incline grows, because I will be reading the whole series for sure. But the other thing, I just love some of the facial expressions that are drawn in here. She really nails it. I'm gonna find an example. So Charlie's sister knows he's gay, but but she doesn't know that he is dating Nick, but she's suspicious. If that doesn't capture suspicion, I don't know what does. Charlie, just the affection that is drawn between Nick and Charlie, it's adorable. But I really like this one just because of the themes that she handles. She handles them so well, as far as, you know, the difficulties of coming out and the labels that we put on ourselves and self-identification, that kind of thing. Really, really handled well with this. I gave this one 3.5 stars. And the last book that I read in the month of August is The Anthropocene, reviewed by John Green. This is a nonfiction. If you don't know already, so the Anthropocene, so this is the geologic age where humans have had a major impact on stuff. It says the Anthropocene is the current geologic age in which humans have profoundly reshaped the planet and its biodiversity. John Green goes in at the very beginning, he talks about what this title means. And basically what this is I wouldn't call them chapters, they're like sections, but each section is a different subject that he basically talks about, and he either describes the history of that particular subject and or his experience with it. For example, like there's one chapter called Diet Dr. Pepper. It talks about where kind of Diet Dr. Pepper came from, how it became popular, how it was able to survive alongside the likes of Pepsi and Coca-Cola. And then it talks about how it's like one of his favorite drinks. And there are just anecdotes in here for each subject and how that particular subject has had an effect on his life. There's a section on the internet. There's the academic decathlon. There's the Piggly Wiggly. I thought that one was pretty interesting. The Notes app on your iPhone, the QWERTY keyboard, stuff like that. And most of the time, it was interesting. I liked, for some of them, I would say most of them, I found the history of whatever the subject was interesting. And then also most of the time, I found the anecdotes from his personal experience with those subjects interesting. But there were some subjects in here that he kind of got a little, I felt, overly philosophical about. There were also some times where he got a little bit overly sentimental about some things that just, I don't know, just wasn't enjoyable to read about. I felt like there were probably about anywhere between 5 and 10 subjects that could have been left out, and this would have been really great. But that's, you know what, that's subjective. I think this is one of those where maybe some of the subjects that I didn't really connect with, someone else is going to connect with them. You can tell from his writing that he's a very sensitive, shy, unassuming guy. I appreciate that to an extent. And again, this is nonfiction. He's not telling a story. He's actually kind of talking to you, talking to the reader, and telling his experience and his thoughts on each of these subjects. There is something in here for everybody. It's hard sometimes to put like a star rating when this is coming from somebody's personal experience. Kind of like memoirs, giving a star rating to a memoir. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. As far as my enjoyment of this book, I gave it 3.5 stars. So that is it. Those are the books that I read in the month of August. My favorite book of the month was, well, I guess I would have to say it was the only 5-star read, and that's November Rogue. Really enjoyed that one. Have you read any of these books? And if so, do you have any thoughts for me? I would love for it if you commented down in the doobly-doo. What was your favorite read of August? And do you have any recommendations for me? If you liked some of these books and you thought, well, gosh, if she liked that one, maybe she'd like this one, I would love to hear from you. What I'm reading now, I am listening to Apples Never Fall by Leanne Moriarty, and I am reading If It Bleeds by Stephen King. What are you all reading right now? If you are still watching at this point, please consider giving that like button a boop, and a subscribe would be wonderful. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.